surgery in 1991 from Bhartiyar University, Coimbatore, and then he did MD Ayurveda in 2001 from Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bengaluru. He has been contributing in the field of Ayurvedic research since the last 24 years and has more than 60 publications. He has earlier he was with Avatar, an Ayurvedic research center in Coimbatore. Recently he is the research director of Amrita Center for Advanced Research in Ayurveda in Amritapuri, the main campus of this Amrita chain of universities in Kerala. So he is involved in several research projects on Ayurveda literature and INSA history of science activities related to Ayurveda. He is honored with Ayurveda Marga Pravartaka Award by research what foundation? L. Mahadevan Research Foundation in 2014. Then Vaidya Sundarlal Joshi's Smruti Shodha Puraskaram by Maha Gujarat Medical Society in 2015, and Bharadwaja Puraskaram Award by Purushottam Ayurveda Ashram in 2000, Poontotam Ayurveda Ashram in 2017, and many other awards. We are very happy to have him here because we are particular that a person who is good in research, who is in teaching, and who is a good communicator, that person only should deliver these lectures. So I am very happy to invite him. So we will just give him a present him with this. Yeah. He is very busy and in demand. Actually, day after tomorrow has to be in Jamnagar, and he could come only today. So today he is giving 3 lectures, and tomorrow he is giving 2 lectures. So it's very kind of him to to agree for this kind of a packed program. Professor Ram Manohar.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Many thanks to Professor Sri Ramji for inviting me. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here for this instructional course and to share my views and experiences in learning and teaching and practicing Ayurveda. So when I prepared these lectures, I got some hints, but I was not really sure about the audience who would be participating in this program. So I have not gone too much into the technical medical aspects, but rather it's an overview, it's introductory. But in the course of the discussions, if you would like to focus deeply on certain areas, you're most welcome. We can pause in between and discuss a little bit more. Of course, although there are 5 lectures, 5 hours, they are divided into 5 topics, so we don't have time for each of them. So I'm just trying to give an overview. The first lecture is on the evolution of Ayurveda in India, because Ayurveda has this remarkable continuity. There's I think comparable only to Chinese medicine, which has survived such a long evolutionary phase in history, and also faced, compared to Chinese medicine, Ayurveda has faced much more challenges, political challenges, invasions even, and so the survival of Ayurveda is quite remarkable. So I would like to hear briefly overview how Ayurveda evolved in the Indian subcontinent and how it became a powerful system of medical thought, which also influenced the development of medicine in other parts of the world. So first of all, there is this debate amongst scholars about what is the origin, how did Ayurveda originate, and this issue of whether it is originating from the Vedas as the classical texts would have it, or whether it had other extra Vedic origins, is still being debated by historians, and we have not really arrived at a scholarly conclusion regarding this. Because if you look at the earliest textbooks of Ayurveda, they are already very well developed, and they are all composed in the post-Vedic period, and all of them have also been edited and modified over a long period of time. So if you really look into the antiquity of Ayurveda, I mean, we cannot see through the mists of time. It's really very difficult to come to any conclusions. So I don't want to get into those arguments, and I would like to make some general statements that the very fact that we cannot see the origins of Ayurveda speaks of its antiquity and the long evolutionary history that it has gone through. So one basic debate is that whether, as the texts claim, Ayurveda has originated from the Atharva Veda, which is the most popular version, or from the Rig Veda, according to some other sources, or whether, as many historians, especially from the West, would have it, that Ayurveda actually originated in the Shramana traditions, and especially through the Buddhistic system, and was later adopted by the Orthodox Brahminic school, as they put it. So the reason is that there's definitely a very striking difference in the nature of medicine as we see it in the Vedic literature and as we see it in the classical Ayurvedic literature. They're not comparable, because in the Vedic literature we have more of, what you can say, ritualistic methods of healing, which become extremely rational and organized when we come to the classical Ayurvedic text. So it is this gap between the Vedic practice of medicine and the classical Ayurvedic practice that has prompted, the debate amongst historians as to whether Ayurveda has really originated from the Vedas. So, in my opinion, I mean, we don't have time to go into all the details. From what I have read about these historical accounts and scholarly debates, we are yet to come up with, convincing, solid evidence that can help us to take a decision in either direction. I mean, we don't yet have that kind of scholarship to come to conclusions. But I would like to point out to some interesting concepts within the classical Ayurvedic texts and tradition, which seem to give an explanation of how Ayurveda could have actually originated from Vedas, in spite of there being a big difference between the nature of the two practices. Kashyapa Samhita is one of the oldest Ayurvedic textbooks, which is now available only in fragments. A lot of it was lost. So, in the Kashyapa Samhita, it's only in this text that we find a statement that Katham cha Ayurveda pragutpanna. How did Ayurveda originate in the beginning? So no other textbooks put it in such an explicit way, this direct question, from where did Ayurveda really originate? And the text says, Atharva Veda Upanishatsu pragutpanna. So this is very interesting, because it's one thing to say that Ayurveda has been derived from Atharva Veda, but another thing to specify that it has come in the Upanishads. The Upanishadic segment of the Atharva Veda, because we can see here a parallel to the development of the six darshanas, the Vedantic tradition, which has also originated from the Upanishadic part of the Vedas. So this in one way explains why the Ayurvedic system was more rationalized, and in spite of the fact that it emerged from a Vedic system of medicine which was more ritualistic, because this we see also in the Veda, and the difference in Vedic, the Karma Kanda of the Veda and the Jnana Kanda, which later inspired the development of the Darshanas. So this is one very interesting concept which has not been so far discussed seriously, this kind of a possibility. I mean, most of the scholars have been kind of baffled by this contrast. And another interesting text which deserves further study is the Kaushika Sutra, which is also part of the Atharva Veda, and it's very much a transitional text. In the Kaushika Sutra, we can clearly see this kind of shifting between ritualistic and more logistic system of medicine. So I would like to stop here by giving a general conclusion that while historians are still engaged in this debate of extra and Vedic or Vedic origins of Ayurveda, there is need to further explore these alternate explanations of how Ayurveda could have possibly, originated from the Vedas in spite of this contrast. So this is just an opening statement about the evolution or the early origins of Ayurveda. So when we look at the traditions, we see it's actually a Western scholar from Netherlands who has, for the first time, and I'm sharing that material here, has made a voluminous text in 5 volumes of History of Indian Medical Literature. So before that we did not have all this information in one place, and I have just picked up some names from his book because it's quite impressive to see the number of names that are associated with the tradition of Ayurveda. I mean, the number of people who have contributed, it's innumerable. And Professor Muhlenberg has listed almost all of these authors and given us brief biography, or at least a descriptive statement from what is available in the text about who these authors were and in what time period they lived. And for the first time we have a very impressive sketch of this tradition of personalities who contributed to the development of Ayurveda. And some of them are also disappearing into the mystical kind of or mythological domain, but many of them are definitely historical. So this is what we see. If we go into the very early phases, many of these personalities like Dhanvantari, Agastya, Atreya, they are almost mythical personalities. But later in the middle period of Ayurveda's history, we do have other challenges in identifying people. Some of them are definitely historical, but their identities are muddled up. So we have Nagarjuna, and the question is which Nagarjuna. So we have such debates about Sushruta, Vagbhada and Nagarjuna, the confusion of historical personalities, Madhava. So there are many such examples. But in the later phase we do find that we have much more accurate biography and information. So many of these people are definitely historically real personalities. So this is how we get this whole picture. And it goes without saying, like most of the Indian traditions, Ayurveda was basically an oral tradition for a long time. And we do not really know at which point of time it was really, written down, because most of the manuscripts that we have date only about 200 to 300 years. So there are copies and copies of copies. But this distinction is referred to in the texts about at a point of time when the texts become written. And one of the systems was that every student who studied under a teacher had to write down a copy of the text, and that is one way in which this was transmitted and preserved in textual form. Now all these textbooks are themselves conveying a long story of addition and refinement. Now if you look at the Charaka Samhita, it's not just the first version, because it was originally called as the Agnivesha Tantra, and we do not know when it was exactly composed, but several centuries before the Common Era, perhaps predates Hippocrates. It's very difficult to kind of come to any conclusions here. And then much of this text was lost, and then Charaka is a person who made a major revision, and that is how, because he revised, he's called as a Pratisamskarta, a person who completely reworked a lost textbook, reconstructed it, and then it came to be known as the Charaka Samhita after him. And even after Charaka, major portions of the text was lost, and up to the 4th century of the Common Era, major editions happen, and Dridhavala is the last person who seems to have worked on the text in a major way. So we have at least 1,000 years of textual editing behind Charaka Samhita, and only the major editings have been actually documented. So it's quite clear that even more editions have happened, because scholars in Vienna who are doing a critical edition of the Charaka Samhita, they found two recensions of this text, from the Kashmiri recension, then the Bengal recension, and even the order of the chapters are very different in both of these variations. So this is very interesting because this shows that Ayurveda had a very dynamic system of updating knowledge from time to time, and it's wrong to think that it is a static tradition and that the first text was followed without any change. In fact, we find major changes happening in the textbooks, whole chapters being rewritten, knowledge being updated, but still the original name is sometimes retained. But in the case of Charaka Samhita, it's very interesting that the name of Agnivesha is no longer retained, so which shows that a very major change. But in the colophon at the end of each chapter, Agnivesha is acknowledged. Itya Agnivesha krite tantre Charaga pradi samskrite dridhabala sampurite. So these three major changes in the text are always acknowledged. On the other hand, the Sushruta Samhita had also undergone similar kind of revisions. So we had Nagarjuna doing a first revision, major revision around the period that Charaka worked on the Agnivesha Tantra. And then we have at the 10th century Chandrada, a scholar, doing a Patashuddhi, or a complete editing and cleansing up of the text. So this is again many thousands of years of editing work that has gone into these samhitas. Now, what is really interesting about these two samhitas, and which also gives a certain insight into the old system of teaching, was that all these textbooks are known by the name of the student. I mean, they are actually notes of the students. They are not written by teachers. So Agnivesha Tantra is perhaps the first student note that became a textbook. Sushruta was also a student. So this tradition in the beginning, it was definitely there in the beginning of the history of Ayurveda, but later it became real teachers who started writing the textbooks. And in my discussions with some ancient teachers, I mean older teachers of the traditions, and then whom I could interact immediately after the completion of my course, I mean they were their viewpoint was that in the classical tradition of Ayurveda, the teaching was very student centric. In fact, the teacher's ability would be confirmed only if the student was able to perform. So if Agnivesha wrote a textbook, it means that Atreya was successful. So it was necessary that every student was made capable of, and also this shows that every time a student completes study and writes a textbook, the latest advancement of that knowledge is also documented. So the student studies, updates, and then records what he has learned, and at the end of the study he is becoming an expert. So he is endorsed by the teacher that the student is as good or even better than me. But this tradition was also lost over a period of time. For example, the Kashyapa Samhita already is known by the name of the teacher and not the student. So this was also modified. Vriddha Jivaka, then Yaksha rediscovered it. So the same story goes with all the classical Ayurvedic textbooks. So the point I want to convey here is that these textbooks have gone through a lot of editing, evolution, and it would be wrong to think that they are static and we're just referring to first versions of the books. Most of them are very modern. They are reached their final shape many centuries after the Common Era. Then we have also a very interesting Bhela Samhita, which is Bhela is again a contemporary of Agnivesha. But Bhela's name survived. It's still the student's name. It never got modified. Now, very interestingly, the influence of some of these samhitas into the regional traditions is also interesting, because in Kerala we have a caste of physicians known as the Velas, and they have also contributed a lot by creating what they call as manjaris, or the Manjari means an inflorescence, so it's actually Chikitsa Manjaris. They are very popular in Kerala. So they compiled a lot of successful formulations which they used in their practice in the form of Manjaris. And in one of the Kerala, there's a poetical work which talks about a commentary called Samvelika. And now some scholars are of the opinion that this is actually a commentary on the Bhela Samhita, of which we have only one manuscript. A scholar from Japan by name Tsutomu Yamashita, he was the first person to kind of work on this and create a text-based, a machine-readable version of the Bhela Samhita. Now many publications are available, but this book is also seen only in bits and pieces. And what's interesting is that there are a lot of information that you see in one textbook that is not available in the other. Now, for example, it's only in the Bhela Samhita that we have a description, very clear description of the circulation of the blood, that the blood actually moves out of the heart and then comes back. Hrido raso nisaradi tasmad edi cha sarvada sirabhir hridayam vedi tasmad hrit prabhava siraha. This is seen only in the Bhela Samhita. So so this also gives us an idea that a lot of this information were scattered in many textbooks. A lot of it was lost. Only some, I don't think all of them could be recovered, even though a lot of redaction and recovery was attempted. Another interesting thing from the Bhela Samhita is that the location of the mind. Generally, it is understood that Ayurveda describes the heart as the seat of the mind, which is actually a misunderstanding, because the Ayurvedic texts only say that Hridayam Chetana Sthanam. Now, Chetana does not mean mind. This is a common mistake that has been made by translators. Because Charaka Samhita clearly says that manas is achetanam kriyavacha mana chetayita apara yuktasya manasa tasya nirdishyande vibhokri. So manas is achetanam. So once we know that definition, we cannot say that manas is the seat, hridaya is the seat of manas, because hridayam chetana sthanam, and chetana dhatu is the atman or consciousness, and Manas is actually an indriya. So this idea is there in the classical text, but not so explicitly stated, that prana pranabhradam yatra shruta sarvendriyani cha yad uttamanga mangasya shiras tada vidhiyade. So the shiras is understood in classical Ayurvedic tradition as the sthana of indriyas, whereas the hridaya is the chetana sthanam, the seat of consciousness. And the simple explanation is, we always identify ourselves when we say I. You automatically place your hand over your heart, you never say I. So it's when you are in your mind that your hand points to your head, which means you are in your ego. Then your hand will point to your head. But when you are in your heart, and now modern science has come to the point that they say there are about 40 million neurons in the heart, and that there's a small brain in the heart. There are observations about heart transplant. I was just reading about many case stories, one of which was really very graphic account of a person who received a heart transplant from a suicide victim. And this person develops an attachment to the wife of that person, marries her, and then after a few years commits suicide in the same way that the other person. Now this is being understood. Modern science is now calling this a cellular memory. So I wanted to know whether this is even discussed among scientists, but if you look at PubMed and these science databases, you do find theories and discussions about cellular memory. Of course, the interpretations are different. People who they say that this is why the soul is here. But the Atman is all pervading. It cannot locate. This is another question. The Atman cannot locate itself in any particular organ in the body. So even by Ayurvedic things. So it doesn't make sense to say that's because the Atman is in the heart. But there is this phenomenon of cellular memory. So Ayurveda is also very pragmatic, medical science. It has just made observations, and there definitely the heart has been associated with a deeper awareness of self-consciousness, and that's what we mean by Chetanasthana. But in the Bhela Samhita, we have a very clear definition. Shiras talvandaragadam sarvendriya param manaha tatrastham tadhi vishayan indriyanam rasadik, which means Shiras talvandaragadam, between the Shiras and the Talu here, that is the place of the mind. And the mind is with the sense organs. So that's naturally, all our five senses are in the head, so the mind also has to be there. It was a very logical conclusion. So anyway, this is the just an overview of the classical textbooks of Ayurveda and how they have evolved and how different texts have different information. Now Ayurvedic textbooks have also, we have a very, very rigorous literary tradition. In fact, this method of structured technical writing, there's been a very important contribution from Ayurveda. We know this Tantra Yuktis, which are, set of rules with which you structure a technical writing. We find this in Kautilya's Arthashastra, in Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, but major descriptions are actually seen only in the Ayurvedic tradition. All the earliest classical Ayurvedic textbooks describe the Tantra. Iti Tantra Gunair Yuktam Tantra Dosha Vivarjidam. So it was very, very important that technical writings were structured meticulously, and we have different types of textbooks in Ayurveda. So for example, we have the Samhitas, which are very comprehensive. It's like a knowledge supermarket. Samhita is that where you can get everything. Yadi hasti tadanyatra yanne hasti na tatkvacha. This is what Charaga says at the. So it doesn't literally mean, what he says is that that's what he has attempted. That you have everything in one place now. Here you don't have to go into many other texts. But this, again and again, we find this theme coming in the classical text. Like Vagbhada has to argue a lot to convince people that his book should be read. So he says, Yadi Charaga Mathide Tat Sushrudadi Pranigadida Gadhanam Namamatre Vibhahya Atha Charaga Vihina Prakriyaya Makhinna Kimiva Kalu Garodu Vyadhidanam Varaga. So he says that, okay, if you want to read Charaka, you read Charaka, but you will miss many things. If you want to study Sushruta, you study Sushruta, but again, you will miss many things. So if out of delusion you do that, then you destroy yourself. He even tells it so explicitly. And he says, this is the reason. You will get both if you read my textbook. So this was the concept of a Samhita. So after a period of time, the Samhita tradition came to an end. I think the Ashtanga Hridaya Samhita is the last of the true Samhitas that were composed. This was around the 7th century. And after that we have only what we call as Prakarana Granthas. This will be very clear when we come to the concept of Brihatrayi and Lakhutrayi. This shift in the way the literature was written is quite evident here. So we have Samhitas, and we have Nikhandus or medical lexicons, we have Sutras or aphorisms, we have things like Ayurveda Sutra, Rasa Vaisheshika Sutra, and then we have Koshas, which are again glossaries, and then Vyakhyas, which are commentaries. There are about 15 types of Vyakhyas described. It's also one of the Tantra Gunas. And then Yoga Sangrahas or formularies. This has later on become a very popular kind of writing in Ayurveda. Every physician would compile the best of the formulations that they have used in clinical practice. Now this is very important and interesting because these are endorsements of formulations from time to time. So you can find this in the collection of individual physicians. In their homes, what we normally recover are Yoga Sangrahas. So they have and this is a very rich and unexplored aspect of Ayurveda. Today, especially when we are looking for herbal formulations and newer alternative medicines which are more balanced, and this is hardly looked into because we are still searching only the classical textbooks. They are actually kind of, illustrative texts. They are not kind of exhaustive. In fact, Charaka Samhita says, Yogaireva Chikitsan hi deshadyatnyo aparadhyati. If you just don't follow the yogas which I have mentioned here, Subuddhevam Sahasrani Kotir Vapi Vikalpayed
Bahudravya Vikalpatvad Yoga Sankhyana Vidyade. So don't follow what I have written here, because this is just to give you an example of how to formulate a medicine. So you have to create according to the condition. Diseases change, people change, and that part is a practical part of Ayurveda which has been preserved in these Yoga Sangrahas, and this is not studied. They have not even been transcribed, they have not been published. So I think a very rich inheritance through individual practitioners is lying hidden in these Yoga Sangrahas. Of course, they are not as prestigious or as charismatic as textbooks of Charaka or Sushruta, which is probably the reason why scholars may have neglected it, because it's just the notes of a physician, so it doesn't give that kind of importance. And then we have many Prakarana Granthas, which are monographs on a particular subject or on a particular topic, and I'll give, like the Sharangadhara Samhita. It's called as a Samhita, which is a misnomer, because it's a textbook on pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. Nothing else it discusses there. So this is, we have, if you look at the overall literature of Ayurveda, there are two triads, the greater triad or the Brihatrai, and then the lesser triad or the Lakutrai. In fact, these two triads, I think, conveys this change that happened in the literary tradition of Ayurveda. So we have the three giants, Charaka, Sushruta and Vagbhada. So there's a debate as to whether these are three books or three authors who are known by the name of Brihatrai, because Vagbhada composed two books, Ashtanga Hridaya and Ashtanga Sangraha. So according to some, Brihatrai refers to these three authors, and it's interesting that their names also convey a very interesting process in knowledge building, because Charaka means Chareveti is a wanderer. So this shows that this is one of the ways in which you can acquire knowledge, that the Brihatrai tells you how you must acquire knowledge and how you must communicate. So Charaka is the wanderer, Sushruta is Sushrutam, Sushrutam na Shrutam yena, or in fact Sushruta also says Ekam Shastram Adhiyano na Vidyad Shastra Nishchayam Tasmad Bahushruta Shastram Vijaniyat Chikitsaka. So the Sushruta Samhita is giving this idea of Bahushrutatvam, that you must be widely read, you must hear from, and of course in those days this is again an indication that Bahushrutatvam, that word indicates oral tradition. So it's not that Bahupati. Later we have Tripathi, Bahupatha is that Patha is a concept that comes much later. In the Charaka Samhita, in Ashtanga Hridayam, we already have the idea of Patha. Patha means reading, whereas in the earlier text it is Sravana, and not actually reading. You have to hear it. Shastram Guru Mukhodgirnam. That is what Sushruta Samhita also says, that you must get it directly from the teacher. And Sushruta is well heard, and Vagbhada is Vachi Bhada, I mean one who is very adept in expressing. So this actually shows that you have to explore. Charaka is the explorer, I mean, who accumulates knowledge by oneself. Then you must acquire knowledge from others. That is what you mean, what others have experienced. So Charaka represents the idea that you must accumulate knowledge yourself, and then you must listen from others also, and then express it so that you can communicate. So this is the very, very, very beautiful concept. Yes. Yeah, that is Charaka is a name where we have a lot of confusions, because Charaka is said to be an incarnation of Patanjali. This is this Yogena Chittasya Padena Vajam Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopaharottam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim. So that Patanjali here is said to be Charaka. But Charaka also became a kind of terminology. I mean, people who were, yes, travelers. So many of them came to be known as Charakas. This is what I was mentioning. In that period, we have many Madhavas, many Charakas, and it's very difficult to historically understand who. So that's why there's also debate on dates. So you will find another name Charaka in another period. So it became more like a, what you can say, a title, more than the name of a person. I think Sushruta also is more of a title. So there are many Sushrutas. So Vriddha Sushruta, and that's these kind of Vagbhada also we have Vriddha Vagbhada and the original Vagbhada. So this is the, and when we come down to Lakutrai, which is in the later period, the 8th century, the difference here is these are not samhitas. So that concept of yadi hastri tadanyatra yanne hasti, there was more an emphasis now on specialization. So each of these acharyas, Madhava, Sharngadhara and Bhava are focusing on diagnostics, pharmacy, pharmaceuticals and pharmacopoeia. So this shows that this creative or original thinking, this is quite evident that new theory, development of new theories, expansion of concepts and fundamentals were gradually declining in the evolutionary course of Ayurveda. In this period, there's more emphasis on how to diagnose disease, how to make medicine, and how to formulate these various herbs. So the whole focus is more on just practical applications of Ayurveda. Whereas in Charaka, the Brihatrai, we really find this attempt to accumulate new knowledge, as the names of these acharyas indicate. Explore, hear, and then express. But here, it's just practical. So Madhava is it's a landmark in Ayurvedic diagnostics, because many new diseases were for the first time recorded in the Madhava Nidana. So Sharngadhara Samhita is also interesting, because it's only in this Samhita that we find a very vivid description of respiration. Napistha prana pavana sprishtva hrit kamalandaram kandhat bahirviniryadi padum vishnuvadamridam pitva chambara piyusham punarayadi vegada prinayan deham akhilam jivayan jadharanalam. So here the napistha, so it's interesting is that we know that abdominal muscles are playing a very important role in respiration, and one of the signs of death is also the stopping of the abdominal aspect of respiration. So here the respiration is described as nabhistha pranapavana, as the whole respiratory process being initiated from the nabhi, sprishtva hrit kamalandaram, and touching the hridaya, kandhat bahirviniryadi padum vishnu padamridam. So that Vishnu Padamridam is, two terms are there. One is Ambara Piyusham, that is the nectar in the sky. So a lot of people in modern times have correlated this to oxygen, but we don't clearly have indication that they knew it in that sense. But there was definitely this idea that there is a Piyusha in the Ambaram or the atmosphere, which is being sucked in when you are engaged in the process of respiration. Pitva cha ambara piyusham. So the purpose of respiration is to drink this, atmospheric nectar and then come back inside. And it's very interesting because oxygen is necessary for combustion, for cellular respiration. So prinayan deham akhilam jivayan jadaran, and it ignites the fire. So this is the concept of respiration that we find in Sharngadhara Samhita. In Madhava we find many new diseases like Amavata, which is now correlated to rheumatoid arthritis. It's described for the first time. Many of these acidity disorders, Amla Pitta, which we today understand as GERD, hyperacidity, and we have this Nobel Prize winning discovery of the association of Helicobacter pylori with acidity. So the acidity description is first seen in Madhava Nidana. Okay, so to summarize this, what is interesting is I have not put all the text. It's very much possible to cover the entire geographical map of India with Ayurvedic textbooks. You wouldn't be able to see the country, because there has been contribution from every nook and corner of the country for the development of Ayurvedic literature. And but for Muhlenbelt, it's a matter of shame that this couldn't be done by any Indian scholar. He's the first person to make at least a list of, and I think we have not even digitized this. We have not worked on it. This is a very important work that scholars should do in the future, because this kind of chronogeographical spread at every key point in chronological period, there has been new textbooks created. There has been, from every region of the country, there has been some contribution. So Ayurveda has truly been developed by this collective kind of inputs. So this is very interesting because Ayurveda was extremely localized, extremely decentralized. So in the Ashtanga, the Bhavaprakasha, there is a statement, Yasya deshasya yo jandu, tajjam tasya aushadam hitam. For the people growing in a particular place, the plants, resources of that region are the best suited. And this is how the regional traditions of Ayurveda evolved. I mean, there was no central agency controlling. I mean, people were free to develop and evolve. So much of diversity of medical traditions developed in our country, which we have ignored. Even in modern Ayurvedic education, this diversity is ignored. Everybody is forced to study one kind of Ayurveda, and we are not, capitalizing the strength. So the local traditions are dying out, and we are getting a kind of standardized Ayurveda, which was not actually in the tradition. So deshe anyatra vasadas tattulya gunam aushatham. So even if you are staying somewhere else, you need to get medicines which are of similar qualities. And the second thing is diversity was also mapped. Deshe yojana dwadashande bhinnanyahur dravyana. Even nomenclature changes. 180 kilometers is the radius in which diversity can happen. So traditions can change across 12 yojanas. Every 12 yojanas you can have a different medical application. I mean, the principles are same, but the practice will be different. So this is very fascinating to see that they really identified, at a micro level where this diversity, at what range you can begin to experience the diversity. So food culture changes. This is why our cuisine is also kind of so diverse, that from region to region they encourage this diversity and adaptation to the local situation. So this is the regional traditions, and then we have also, so there are descriptions in classical texts: Bengal, Gujarat, Andhra, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. All these specific regional traditions are described in various classical textbooks. For example, from Karnataka, with the influence of Jainism, I have to say that Ayurveda is not vegetarian. A lot of people think that Ayurveda is vegetarian, but it's sometimes frighteningly non-vegetarian in its approach. I have always wondered why. One of the reasons is that, being a medical science, it has to record the properties of everything in the universe. And because we have to understand, because even if we recommend vegetarianism, people are going to eat non-vegetarian. So a physician has to understand what will happen when you eat some. So even animals which we perhaps never use today, like lion, snake of course used in China, dogs. So there is a famous statement also that don't follow Ayurveda when it comes to meat eating, because Rasagvirya vipaka hi swamamsasya abhi vaidyage kirtidam iti kim tat syad sevaniyam manishibhi. So even dog's meat has been described, properties are described in Ayurvedic texts. That does not mean that we can use it. So the reason is different. In fact, if you look at it very carefully, Ayurveda is very realistic. It has just recorded what people do and then given some recommendations. Nivritta madhyoyo jitatma. So very clearly in few places this emphasis is very much given that you must learn to come out of eating meat and alcohol, but for medical purposes sometimes it is necessary. This is the Ayurvedic stance. But in Karnataka we have a great acharya named Ugraditya, who for the first time wrote a vegetarian textbook on Ayurveda. So this is also interesting. If you look at the diversity, there's a lot of freedom of different people presenting Ayurveda in their cultural, socio-cultural kind of context, even religious influences. Ayurveda was kind of very open and neutral. People could present it in many different ways. So we have also, so this Kalyana Karaka is the only textbook that we see where it's a purely vegetarian approach of Ayurveda is professed. Then we have caste based traditions. Ayurveda was not confined to just the upper Brahmin caste. even though, so this is also a debate amongst historians that they had controlled it. In fact, in Kerala, some of the greatest physicians were from a lower caste. I mean, the knowledge of Ayurveda, most of the very, peculiar specific techniques were preserved by the lower castes. So they are Mannan, Velas, and even now we find remnants of those families, and their contributions have been really very significant. Kaviraja. Okay. Vaidya. But they also use this Kaviraja epithet in Bengal. Yes. But in Kerala we find that Ayurveda crossed all boundaries of caste, religion. We have the Muslim tradition of Ayurveda is very strong, especially in Marma. There are Christian priests. I mean, not just Christians, but Christian priests who swear by the Ashtanga Hridaya. So even now in modern times, there is a Christian doctor. He's a first medical oncologist of Kerala. He and some of his patients in late stage cancer got cured by some Siddha medicine. So he turned over to Ayurveda, and now he's treating also with Ayurvedic medicines his patients. And he swears, he says these are written by rishis, so they cannot be wrong. I'm seeing the results. So what I wanted to say that Ayurveda, there were no religious or caste based inhibitions, that everybody could take it and use it. So some of the strongest Vishavaidya traditions are preserved by Christian missionaries in Kerala. The Vishavaidya, one of the reasons probably could be that Vishavaidya, there was a belief that you should not charge for your services when you treat snake poisoning. So they had to live, give free services, and after a time, probably this couldn't be continued. And the Christian missionaries took this up because it was easy for them to do this in that way. And in Kottayam, there is even now a father who is, doing the traditional Ayurvedic treatment for snake bites. But in more recent times, with the establishment of modern snake venom clinics and the development of polyvenom, this is slowly kind of dying out. And another important aspect is the specialization. So in Kerala we do have this Ashtavaidya tradition, which is very unique to Kerala. I mean, nowhere else in the country we have physicians attempting to specialize in all 8 branches. So this is kind of after specialization, it's an afterthought that no, specialization is making you too focused on one aspect. So instead of coming back to generalization again, they become specialized in everything. So that's another kind of a generalization, which I think medicine is still not reached that phase. We are still, this is unique in Kerala. They were called as Ashtavaidyas or Ashtanga Vaidyas because Ayurveda had 8 branches, and 8 branches means there's a logic behind this, that the body in 3 stages of avasthatraya, Balya, Yauvana and Vardhakya. So we have Bala Chikitsa, Kaya Chikitsa and Jara Chikitsa. So Bala Chikitsa is for young age, Kaya Chikitsa is for the adulthood, and Jara Chikitsa is when you are old. And then in this body, the Indriya Sthana or the Shiras is most important. So it is the connection between the body and the mind. So there is an entire branch exclusively for head and neck. It's called as Jat Urdhva Jatru Chikitsa or Shalakya Chikitsa because they use probes or shalakas because there are so many cavities here. So that Shalakya is there, and then within this region is the mind. So you have another branch for the mind. It's called Graha Chikitsa or Bhuta Chikitsa, and in one sense Bhuta and Graha means, Bhuta Graha means you are caught by your past. And there are very interesting theories in Ayurveda that there are no Pishachas or Rakshasa. It is you yourself who are responsible. Atmanam eva manyeta kartaram sukha dukhayo tasmat sreyaskaram margam prapadyeda natresed. So no Gandharva or Pishacha can catch you unless you have an internal weakness. Actually, according to Ayurveda, mental illness is you are getting stuck with your past. I mean, you're not able to come out of. That's why the word bhuta and graha, seized by your past, is a very nice way of describing the Ayurvedic approach to psychiatric illnesses. And then we have two other branches which are protecting the body from external injuries, poisoning and injury. So we have Visha Chikitsa and Shalya Tantra. And then the last one is, in spite of taking all these efforts to protect your body and mind, the body will eventually die. So we have reproductive medicine, how to create a new body before, which is, it's not just about procreation, but procreating with awareness. So in Ayurveda, it's not just the physical body, healthy body that has to be procreated, but mind with samskara, so that the continuity of the samskara is assured. So this is the 8 branches, and this is interesting because pediatrics, surgery, definitely Ayurveda predates all known medical history of specialization.
Modern medicine is state medicine or forensic medicine.
Yes.
But in Ayurveda it is called, I forgot now, Ayurveda it is called
Agada Tantra. Agada Tantra, Vidya, Vishachikitsa, all these terms are there. It deals with Sthavara Visha, Jangama Visha, deals with intentional poisoning and also accidental poisoning. We also have a special branch for food safety. It's called Anna Raksha. So how to protect food from poisoning, which is very interesting, and there's elaborate descriptions on how to identify food poisoning and how to deal with it. Now later there was super specialization. So we have in Kerala is very unique in this, that even today we have specialized traditions of ophthalmology, just Netra Chikitsa, which was not part of the Ashtangas. Yeah, it was Shalakya is including everything, ENT, dentistry, but here we have specifically ophthalmology, just dealing with eye. And many such traditions are still alive. Kerala also boasts of the only Netra Roga, Manoroga tradition. They are the Punkudil Mana, which is the only tradition of psychiatric healing which has survived to modern times. We have in Kerala also Bala Chikitsa experts, pediatricians, surgeons. So many of these traditions have survived into modern times. Dentistry, then bone setting, then Rasa Shastra or iatrochemistry, using metals and minerals as medicines. And we also have people who specialize in obstetrics, in child birth, and we also had this dye tradition, traditional birth attendants, which were inspired from the Ayurvedic tradition.
very interesting. Geriatrics is taken in modern medicine. Not yet geriatrics has been taken up as a course.
Yes.
But in Kerala
It's in Ayurveda, it is there. Yes, in Kerala there are Ayurvedic physicians who are now performing this geriatrics practices, one of which involves a special kuti or garbhagriha is maintained, where you are cut off from exposure to sunlight. It's ventilated, but you don't interact with the external world, and you have to stay inside for months taking a rasayana medication. And this was called the Kuti Praveshika Rasayana. Rasayana or methods to rejuvenate your system are broadly classified into 3. One is Achara Rasayana, which is lifestyle and counseling, making your mind stress free. The second thing is Vatatipika, which involves intake of medicines, but Vatatipika means you can be exposed to wind and sun. You can lead a normal life and take these medicines. The third is Kuti Praveshika, where you have to enter into a kuti. So it's very interesting that some of the most modern experiments on Kuti Praveshika have actually been done in Kerala, and it's still going on. There is a doctor in Ottapalam, and we can find videos of this. I am actually sharing the link of these resources in the material, one of which is a video which features this Kuti Praveshika Rasayana. So in Ayurveda it is said that in Ayurveda we also say that Purva Vayasi Madhyeva. Geriatrics is not something which we should start when you get old. If I say the application of the Jara Chikitsa begins when you are young. So you have to prepare for healthy aging. This is one strong thing. Ayurveda clearly says that healthy aging is possible. That old age is the golden period in your life. This theory is coming in modern medicine also. Now they have this criteria of successful aging, and there are places, like Hunza tribes near Pakistan. Then there's a small village in Japan and few other places where people are living to be 100 without any problems. And there's a book called Healthy at 100, which is work of some gerontologists who have gone to these places and studied how they live. And what they found, what Ayurveda calls as Achara Rasayana, is what we see in these people. One of the major contributing factors is lack of stress. And one thing they said, all the young people there want to become old, because in our society we have the psychology that we think young age, all our advertisements show how an old person can become young again. Whereas in these regions, one of the market thing is that they celebrate old age. So they're mentally prepared to become old. And what Ayurveda says is that if sunrise is beautiful, sunset is equally beautiful. So old age and death should be the sunset of your life, when actually you can provide your wisdom. That's the point where you share your perspective. So the old people are the shelter for the world. You don't need old age shelters actually. You shouldn't put old people in shelters. So we need to the old people should become shelter for so all our great acharyas, we used to call them Pitamahas, they were all sources of great wisdom who inspired the next generation until their last breath. And they smiled at death and just passed away. So this Ayurvedic approach of gerontology is not just simply reducing the length of the telomere, or it's not just that kind of a biomolecular intervention with which you can reverse aging. No, it's a whole well planned approach to age successfully and then make your last part of your life as productive as possible. So I think we are coming to the end of the first talk. I will quickly go through some other important features. The concept of medical ethics, this was extremely kind of well developed in Ayurveda. I think much more developed than any other part of the world. Because in modern medicine, after the Nuremberg Code, of all the what you can say, inhuman experiments that were conducted that in the Nazi camps, that is what prompted the development of ethics in modern medicine. In fact, when we are trying to do some research, we encounter a lot of problems, because they say that maybe 100 years ago you could have done this, but now we have stopped it in modern medicine. Many of the developments in modern medicine couldn't have happened if ethics there were more ethical. Because if you want to understand what happens when the body freezes, they take a captive and they put them into into a very freezing kind of chamber, and then they measure what happens. So the modern medicine has developed through a lot of cruelty in inhuman, unethical ways. This knowledge has evolved, but now it is extremely rigorous. Everything, even animal ethics.
Ethical clearance doesn't mean that medicine is correct.
Yeah. I'm just concluding this part. So the thing is, when it comes to ethics, just on a lighter side, today, there's no problem if we kill and destroy animals, in inhuman ways for food. But, nobody is putting any rules there. We know that in India, our per head meat consumption is just 5 kilos. In the United States, it's 110 or 120. And if we were to look at the injury and harm that we cause by using meat as food, using animals for scientific research is nothing. We hardly do anything. But the rules are so stringent for animal studies that it's almost impossible to do it. But you can eat the same animal. If you kill and eat, nobody has any problem. So in Ayurveda, we had a situation which was very different. We never did animal experiments. we had Mriga Ayurveda. Mriga Pakshi Shastra is one of the first beautiful descriptive works on zoology. Because we usually had what we can call as Ashwa-Ayurveda, the veterinary science. Then we had animal husbandry, but there's only one textbook that has come to my notice. This is published from Hyderabad, Agro-Asian Research Foundation. It's a book called Pakshi Mriga Shastra. So this is inspired by King Hamsadeva, who once on his hunting expedition suddenly developed compassion. And he said, you know, I'm killing all these animals. Now people should know their value. So he commissioned one of his courtiers to write a textbook describing animals just for the sake of it. Until then, most of our textbooks on animal sciences were utilitarian. I mean, they were either for using an animal, you know, for cattle or horse or elephants. We had, but this is the first textbook which is non-utilitarian, which is just a celebration of animal life. So it describes different animals, birds, their species, how they differ, how they mate, what is their life cycle. So this is a very interesting kind of textbook. And in Ayurveda, but one thing which we did, we never did any medicine before giving to an animal had to be tested on humans. That was our tradition. So every textbook on animal science uses medicines which are already proven to work on humans. So we never tested except for toxicity. So when food safety is discussed, it is mentioned that you can try to give the food to animals. Most of the time they will not take it because they have a better sense of identify. So with inflicting least harm, you can test it on animals. So animal testing was there. There was a reason why we did not test it on animals. We always did it the other way around. So this is an interesting thing. But in ethical thing, we were extremely kind of put very high stringent rules, like the concept of privacy, for example. Gatva adurarthad anyatra na dhatte manakvachit. So if you go to the house of a patient, adurarthad anyatra na dhatte manakvachit. Don't even bother to look at anything else in the house other than he hrepaniyam cha tadvartam na pragashayade bahi. Any news that you get which is private, never disclose it outside. How to behave with women when you go on a consultation, all these things are described in the classical Ayurvedic text. So all the principles which today we have as HIPAA guidelines, all those things are very clearly elaborated in the classical. The problem of taking a consent, pratyakhyaya chikitsed. If you do not know the outcome of your treatment, you have to get a consent, not only from the patient but from the king. So you have to make it public. You have to get a consent that I am trying an experimental treatment. Akriyayam dhruvo mrityu, kriyayam samshayo bhavet. If I don't treat, definitely the patient is going to die. Kriyayam samshayo bhavet. But if I attempt, there is a chance that he may survive. This has to be disclosed before you start a treatment. So I was very surprised when I went to after my course. I was working with traditional healers, and there was this snake poison healer, and the way snake poison was being handled was quite amazing. The whole neighborhood is alert when a snake bite victim comes. So the moment the physician knows, somebody will be there to inform him, the patient, and the whole community gets prepared. The courtyard of the physician is the ICU, and all the neighbors come with all the herbs. They are all ready, and there is a table, and you can see I've witnessed many snake poison cases being treated, and I'm going to share some videos also in the resource material where I have actually directly documented a crate poison bite being healed in about 55 minutes. And this is very interesting because the family members are there, everybody is there comforting the patient, and within 45 minutes the patient goes back home. If you get bitten by a snake and you end up in an ICU, if you're lucky you may survive, but otherwise nobody is going to be there near you when you die. I mean, it's a very inhuman way of treating, and this was quite fascinating. I mean, to see how a lot of socialization, how society was also part of the whole healing process. People knew what to do, very decentralized. So quacks were recognized. I mean, there was a merciless kind of attack on quacks in the classical Ayurvedic texts. Different types of quacks are also described. Another interesting thing is there were many ways to acquire knowledge. Guru Shushrushaya Vidya, Pushkalena Dhanena va, Athava Vidya Vidya. So 3 ways of learning, of which this Guru Shushrushaya Vidya was considered, the most desirable, that you offer your services to the teacher, or you can get one knowledge in exchange for another. Athava Vidya Vidya. Or Pushkalena Dhanena va. So this is, I think the capitation system was there in those days also. That was an option. You could pay a huge sum of money and also then acquire the knowledge. So all these 3 systems were there. But this is the interesting part, is the Gurukula tradition, which was especially because of this emphasis on the oral tradition. I think that was what makes the Gurukula really important, that Shastram Guru Mukhodgirnam, that you have to get it from somebody who has already lived that science. That was the key thing. I mean, the teacher had to be the example. So in Ashtanga Hridayam it is said, Dakshaha Tirthatta Shastrartha. Tirthatta Shastrartha means you have to get it from a Tirtha. Tirtha is a Guru. Tirtha means the place where the river is easy to cross. So the teacher is like that. I mean, he's a place where you can easily cross over and learn Sukhena, Dhruvena, Nischayena. This, easily, so quickly. Drutena, Sukhena, Drutena, Nischayena. Easily, fast, and surely. So this is what the teacher promises. So such a teacher becomes the guru, and then you'll have to learn from such a teacher. Then the decentralized pharmacies. This is also important because this is what completely lost in Ayurveda. This is the reason why Ayurveda is turning out to be one of the costliest medical systems now, much more costlier than modern medicine in many cases, is because of this. We have lost this decentralization. In olden days, the physicians would only write out formulas. It was all open. There was no secret. A lot of people blame Ayurvedic physicians to be not very secretive. I think this is a much later development, because when my young childhood days, I have seen physicians writing prescriptions which are actually, the formulas all revealed. The patient himself has to go and collect the herbs and make it. The houses had all the utensils necessary for making a medicine. So the quality of the medicine was controlled by the patient himself, and the formula was open. I mean, everybody could see that formula. So there are many such compilations of old prescriptions also, preserved in many families. Usually, except for Panchakarma or a few, today, the hospital is actually a source of many diseases. In the United States, I was shocked to read in the BMJ that the 3rd leading cause of death is medical intervention. The first is heart disease, the second is cancer, and the third is the doctor, especially in a hospital environment. The doctor is a cause of mortality. So in Ayurveda we said that healing should happen in a homely situation. So doctors always went to the home of the patient rather than bringing the patient to a hospital. So hospitals were encouraged only when we had to do very intensive. So we have a Panchakarma hospital. We have a Sutigagara, I mean, for childbirth and taking care of the woman in the first days after childbirth. So only in few cases they had a hospital based treatment. And then the last point in this slide is about the folk and classical streams. This is very, very important, because Ayurveda gave a lot of importance to even the common day experiences of the common man. So Ayurveda also uses a language which it wanted to percolate into society. I mean, Ayurveda wanted the Shastric knowledge to get into the mainstream. So that is why simple terminologies like Vayu and all those were used so that people could easily relate to them. Ushna, Shita, they were all kind of metaphorical usages, and we find that a lot of knowledge in Ayurvedic tradition came from the folk stream. So the first discovery, Ayurveda acknowledges few things, that how this knowledge evolved. One is through zoopharmacognosy, what we today call as zoopharmacognosy, which means that from animals, Nakulo Veda Bheshajam, Varaho Veda Bheshajam. The Nakula knows, the Varaha knows, the Sarpa Gandharva ye vidu, ta asma, I mean the last word I forget, it's a Vedic Sanskrit, so it means that let the medicine which the Garuda knows, the mongoose knows, let it come to be for my help. So a close so Ayurveda recognized that a lot of new knowledge can come from actual encounters of life in natural settings. So where there is biodiversity, where there are higher life forms, this knowledge automatically kind of sprouts. I was intrigued to read about the story of sparrows picking up cigarette butts in a university in North America, and the faculty there were surprised, curious to find out what happened. Why are the sparrows taking up all the cigarette butts? And when they followed, they found that the sparrows took it to their nests, opened the cigarette butts and sprinkled this tobacco around the nests, and it was found that this would help to ward off a parasite that was coming and attacking the eggs. Now there's no experiment involved here. The sparrows just knew that this is if it were to be developed by human experimentation, I mean it would take ages before we even got a clue that this tobacco there is a specific medicine, I mean a chemical that can ward off this parasite. So this is zoopharmacognosy. This was recognized in Ayurveda. The second thing is, Ayurveda says that Oshadhir Namarupabhyam Janate Ajapavane Avipascheva Gopascha Yechanye Vanacharina. Achapas, Gopas, those who are roaming into the forest, they know many of these medicines, so you please also learn from them. So this open approach, one of the texts also says Prayojanartha Vajana Pravritti Yasmadata Prakrita Mitya Dosha. So Prakrita does not mean it is doshavat. From Prakrita also we can get a lot of useful knowledge. So this is also very clearly kind of described. So then we have cross-cultural exchanges. So this brings us to the next topic, because the second topic is the contributions of Ayurveda to the world of medicine. So I hope I was able to sketch briefly, give a snapshot of how Ayurveda evolved in the Indian cultural milieu and what were its basic achievements. I have not tried to be historically accurate because frankly my own engagement with all these studies have left me more confused than clear about the history and the details. It's so overwhelming when you find so many people, so many books, so many traditions, so much of diversity. I always came out enthralled and enthused and maybe enchanted that Ayurveda survived all this and it's still alive today. So I'm not so much bothered about the historical accuracy here, but these are the takeaway messages that we get from the history of Ayurveda. So before we go to the next topic, maybe if there are any actually speaking, this is more of a what I can say a regional conflict that has brought out this difference. Of course, in the name, Siddha means it was developed by Siddhars. Siddhars are people who have achieved, the highest goal in their lives. Yeah. This is because the Westerners. I think in that period we had this Arya Dravidian conflict, the Tamil Sanskrit conflict, which is unfortunate, which has actually fueled this. It's more of a regional identity than actual difference, because Agastya is one of the propounders of Siddha, and Agastya is there in the Ayurvedic tradition as one of the rishis who first received the knowledge of Ayurveda. And we also know that Agastya, he came from the north to India, and the Vindhya mountains, still the contract is on that the Vindhya mountains will not grow until he goes back. So if you look at it classically there is lot of evidence pointing out to the continuity of these traditions. Now in Ayurveda itself, around the 11th century, there was another branch called Rasa Shastra. So Nagarjuna, his famous statement, Siddhe Rase Karishyami Nirdaridram Idam Jagat. So how lower metals can be converted to gold. That was how the whole thing started. It's called Lohaveda, how iron can be made into gold. And then this idea came that if you can do Lohaveda, can we do also Dehaveda? Can we convert the body also into a... So the origin of Rasa Shastra, Rasa means no, that's true. Rasa has multiple meanings, one of which is mercury itself. Rasati Gachati, because mercury will just move away. Our Rasa Dhatu is also Rasa. Taste is Rasa. Nama Rasas. Essence, something essence, this is also Rasa. So actually in Rasa Shastra all these meanings come together. That we are able to Rasi Bhava or Amriti Karana is that what is the delight of life from inert matter. That is what Rasa Shastra means. So Rasa Shastra represents an early attempt to, because life, even today, we cannot create life other than from pre-existing life. I mean, you need pre-existent life, even stem cells, cloning, all this require that there is already pre-existing life. So we simply do not know how to bring a group of chemicals together and create. Now Agastya, mythologically, he created his own daughter from mud, that Lopamudra. Lopamudra was created by Agastya from mud. So the connection between Agastya Siddha and Rasa Shastra is interesting, because Rasa Shastra is this attempt of converting inert matter into rasa, means into life fluid. So you make your body accept it. Otherwise it's a toxin. So it's either Amrita or Visha. And there is a thin line that separates these two. So the Rasa Shastris were the first people who worked on converting metals and minerals into a form that would be acceptable to the Rasa Dhatu. And that is why that word Rasa became, having multiple meanings. It's not just mercury. And all of these people, it's important to understand that their first goal was to see, that's how the Siddha system came, because Siddhas actually wanted to use this to become immune to diseases so that they could engage in their spiritual austerities and practices. Siddha system did not evolve basically to treat people. It basically evolved in this context. And this Rasa Shastra, if you actually say, herbal medicine developed in the north and came to Ayurveda, Kerala, and now Kerala is talking about originality and purity of herb, but it is not originated from Kerala. It is from the Himalayas that the Kerala Ayurveda originated. And if you look at North India, is now holding on to Rasa Shastra as the real medicine, which probably originated from Tamil Nadu. So this big exchange happened, and without either party knowing this, they are clinging on to. That is the irony. I mean, that's the irony of, the paradoxical state which regionalism can take you in. I think we need to grow over that. So Siddha system is basically the Rasa Shastra application, which through the experiments of Agastya. Even in Parvati we have this idea. Ganesha is created by a non-biological process. From mud again, not from pre-existing life. And we have also myths about life coming, cloning, and many myths are there. In fact, science fiction in Ayurveda is fascinating. That's another topic altogether, because myths and science fiction are different. Myth can be totally kind of exaggerated, but science fiction is something which really becomes reality. And if you look at that, our tradition is full of science fiction more than just myths, because most of those things have become a reality now. And another interesting thing, Agastya is also a Kumbhayoni. So we have really, he's probably the first test tube baby, at least conceptually. So in Agastya we find all these experimental, that whole this is why the personalities need to be studied in Ayurvedic tradition, because each of them represent a whole approach in knowledge development, and they have a big story to say. So Agastya is a Kumbhayoni. He created Lopamudra out of his own this thing, and then he is also the master of Siddha system of medicine. So he was an experimenter. He was exploring and creating new dimensions to the knowledge of Ayurveda. So in my understanding, the Siddha system is based on the same philosophy. It's Vata, Pitta, Kapha, it's the Rasa, but they use more of Rasa Shastra medicines, I mean the chemicals, much more than the herbs. But having said that, I was surprised when I went to some Siddha physicians in Kerala and also some Ayurvedic physicians. There are periods, not now, earlier, when I was much younger, that they will go away to collect herbs. And they all say we have to go to Tamil Nadu to get the herbs. So I was surprised. I was saying Kerala is much richer in plants. It's so green, so called God's own country. Why we have to go to Tamil Nadu? They said that the medicines are more potent in Tamil Nadu because Tamil Nadu is a Jangala Desha. Kerala is an Anupa Desha. In Anupa Desha, the medicines don't have that much potency. So actually, according to Ayurveda, more powerful herbs are found in Tamil Nadu. So we cannot also, these are all kind of, we need to really look deeper to understand these dynamics. And Siddha system is also very popular in Kerala, especially if you go to Trivandrum and many other regions. There has been this very great exchange. Another thing that came from Siddha system is the Varma tradition, the marmas, manipulation of marmas. What is interesting is in the Ayurvedic tradition, we have marmas, which are actually anatomical surface markings which a surgeon should avoid when doing surgery. That was the only purpose of marma in Ayurveda. Which will kill, or there are 5 outcomes. If you accidentally injure a marma region, you may get pain, rujakara, vaikalyakara, or you may get disability, or vishalyaghana. If you try to repair it, it will kill you. Like if you have some people, it happens, they are injured with some external, thing, and if you try to remove it, then the person will, then there will be bleeding. This is called vishalyaghana, and then you may die. Your lifespan will be reduced. It's called kalandara pranahara or sadhya pranahara. The damage to a marma can even kill immediately. So for surgeons, it was so important to avoid, cutting into regions which would have these consequences. So they even debated, when you amputate a hand, patient doesn't die, but when you hit a marma in the hand, the patient, how does this happen? So this was also understood that in that particular region, rektakshaya, so they clearly say how the patient dies due to bleeding, or the muscle is damaged, or the bone is damaged, that is why vaikalya happens. So even the mechanism is explained. But what we find interesting in the Siddha tradition of marma is that marmas are manipulated for therapeutic response. This is not there in the Ayurvedic tradition at all. So in Tamil Varma tradition, we have 8,000 Varmas. In Ayurvedic text, we have only 107. So for me, we don't need to bring this because Ayurveda was already localized, regionalized. Kerala Ayurveda has its own specialities. Bengal Ayurveda has its own specialities. Gujarat, it has its own. So in Tamil Nadu, the biggest contribution that was made to Indian medicine, one is in the area of marmas, the other is in the area of Rasa Shastra. And another interesting thing in Siddha system is the nadi. It's not there in the classical Ayurveda. It comes only in the 13th century. In Sharngadhara Samhita is the first time that nadi is described. There is no nadi in Charaka or Sushruta or any of those, and we don't know why. But definitely the oldest textbooks of Siddha system has this. And there's ongoing debate now trying to establish that Siddha is more older than Ayurveda. I don't know what is going to be the use of such an exercise because it's so difficult to really establish anything. The only thing I can say is Agastya, Charaka, Agastya, Atreya, Dhanu, they were all contemporaries. So it all seems to have evolved at some point and then ramified, developed in different ways. And initially, Central Council for Research in Ayurveda and Siddha was one. And it's only now that it has been separated. So it's more for political reasons than I think for actual. Okay. So we have descriptions on contact with China, contacts with Greece, Yavana, China. These are all described in Ayurveda. In fact, in Kashyapa Samhita and even in Charaka Samhita, the diet habits of people in certain regions are also mentioned. So some of the, like we have Yavani, the name of a drug is because it comes from Yavana Desha. So one of the major contacts which made Ayurveda global or extended Ayurvedic influence all over the world is the contact with the Arab world, because Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga, many of these things got translated in this period, and we know that in the Arabic tradition there was significant contributions for the development of modern medicine also at that time. In fact, the Arabic system and the Greek system combined to create today what we know as a Unani system of medicine. And here, this is where Ayurveda and Greek system, through the Arabic influence, unite to create a very interesting, because the Arabic system is actually derived from the Greek system. The four humor theory. The similarities are very superficial. 4 humors in Greek medicine, 3 doshas in Ayurveda are really very different. Because in the Greek system they have the idea of fluids. The 4 humors are fluids that are mixing in the body. Whereas the doshas are not fluids. In fact, they are gunas. Dosha means the opposite of guna. When a guna or a property becomes harmful for the body, we call it as dosha. So it's a tendency, it is the biological properties of your body which we call as doshas, and they need to be balanced. So it's a quality control mechanism of the body. That's what we call as dosha. And vata is definitely not a fluid. In the Greek tradition we don't have vata in the humors, which is a big difference, because vata is the king of doshas. So there is no king in the humors. You have black bile, yellow bile, blood and phlegm. Whereas in Ayurveda we have vata, pitta and kapha. So this difference of vata is a very big difference. So this is, and in the Greek tradition there are 4 elements. Akasha is not there. So whatever is more subtle has been eliminated in the Greek tradition. So we can even maybe speculate that Ayurvedic theory got simplified into a more reductionistic form. So the origin of reductionism we can probably see in the Greek tradition, because they eliminated Akasha because it's not seen. I mean, it's not tangible. And Vata is eliminated because it's not tangible. So we have a reductionistic version of this theory, but still the differences are quite striking. And then in the last period, the colonizers from Europe, so we have Garcia da Horta. Because of this work, the Dutch decided that they will stay back in India because we have rich resources here. This is the first documentation of the flora of Kerala, medicinal plants of Kerala, in the Hortus malabaricus. This is still preserved in Leiden in Netherlands in copper plates, and the Kerala University has come up with 2 publications in English and Malayalam of the Hortus malabaricus. Even today, considering that it was composed in the early 18th, 19th century, I mean the work is very meticulous. I mean, and the diagrams are very detailed, botanical sketches of the plants. Right. So, of course, the last part of this first presentation is an introduction to the second. So, how Ayurveda influenced the rest of the world. Can we have the next slide? The problems that we have is, like, we have tried to anticipate modern medicine in Ayurveda. This is one of the mistakes that has been made when historians try to look at the contributions of Ayurveda. So is there circulation in Ayurveda? Is there respiration in Ayurveda? Is there, because now today we are coming back to Ayurveda exactly because it's different from modern medicine, not because it developed, because it would have been a tragedy in one sense if Ayurveda had also developed, then we would not have had this alternative approach. So I think it is wrong to look at it historically from that viewpoint. So I'm not trying to give a presentation where I say that Ayurveda had this in modern medicine was there, here we were first. No, that approach doesn't make any sense. Of course there are some areas, like one example I want to give is circulation. There is a paper, one of my colleagues has written a paper which was accepted in the American Journal on Physiology. It's a prestigious journal. That Bhela Samhita, as I was mentioning, described circulation. Now my contention here is that blood circulation is different from the circulation that Ayurveda has described, and we are missing this whole point, because in Ayurveda it's not Rakta which circulates but Rasa. And this is very interesting and important, because according to Ayurveda, Rakta cannot move out of the blood vessels. If it moves, we call it bleeding. So Rakta does not circulate completely. Only Rasa can circulate into every nook and corner of the body. So Rasa and Rakta are mixed together. So actually what is circulating is Rasa, and Rakta is moving along. Rakta is trapped in the Shakha. That is the Ayurvedic concept, which is actually very interesting. It could revise our notions. Even modern circulation theory could be revised and reworked with this Ayurvedic insight. The trap that we fall into is that we want to prove that Ayurveda also described circulation. And Hrido Raso Nissarati. We talk about Rasa Chankramanam, not Rakta Chankramanam. Vyanena Rasa Dhaturi Vitshebojita Karmana Yugabat Sarvadojasram Dehe Vikshipyade Sada. So Dosha Dushtaha Rasair Dushyan Dushayan Ubhe Malan. Rasayani hi prapadyashu dosha dehe vikurvate. Because this rasa dhatu is the total fluid environment in the body, which is intracellular, extracellular and vascular. So all the three things together is what Ayurveda calls as rasa. So when the heart is circulating, what we say is that there is an exchange of rasa across these three compartments. The intracellular, the extracellular, that Tvaggada rasa, Koshtagada rasa. Chakrapani is distinguishing this. Tvaggada rasa and Koshtagada rasa, which is very clearly the intracellular and extracellular fluid which we talk about in modern times. And then there is the Siragada rasa, which is the rasa dhatu in the vessels. So the rasa dhatu is that which is actually circulating. So this model, it's a new model actually. It's different from Harvey's model of blood circulation. And to date we have not, and in fact right now I am working on this, proposing this as an alternative theory of circulation, which is original to Ayurveda, and as an alternative to William Harvey's theory of blood circulation. Similarly, if you look at, we have ideas about microorganisms. Ayurveda was the first medical system to talk about the microbiome, the Sahaja krimis, which are asankheya. In fact, today we say that we are outnumbered by the bacteria. We are actually a bacterial colony and not a human being. So inside the envelope of bacteria we have our cells, and inside those cells are the genes. Now we have very early references in Ayurveda to medical genetics, which I will quickly go through. So dentistry. If you look at historically, the first dentist 9,000 years ago, we find that there was an attempt to drill the teeth. So archaeological evidence has been unearthed up to 9,000 years ago. And then we have trepanation in ancient India. So there's no skull discovered anywhere so far archaeologically with so many holes drilled when the patient was alive. I mean, it's quite frightening to imagine the pain the patient would have gone through. This is about a woman's skull. So most of the trepanations are at the after death, or they didn't get enough time to heal. So here one way they know that it was live is you can see healing happened. The skull, the holes have healed. So it means the patient survived after trepanation for a long time. So these are, we find, and then ants to suture surgical wounds. Even today in Africa, this army ant, as it is called, is used to suture wounds. It's a very simple dissolvable suture, very effective, that it's such a strong grip that this is actually a picture of a real suture done with ant heads. And this Jaluka is of course to remove the blood. Yeah, the head, only the head is remaining there. The body is kind of, after they hold it, you just, and it's so strong that it remains till the wound is actually healed. So army ants are used as natural sutures, and their jaws are so powerful that it's like stapling the wounds with these ant heads. So if you were to look at the landmark achievements of Ayurveda, one is rationalization of medicine. I mean, definitely the idea of Hippocrates bringing in rational system of thought, needs to be contended. I mean, I don't want to say that because we historical textbooks. This is the problem why modern doctors are also looking down upon Ayurveda today, because they don't realize that we have. Because I will be sharing that later. The method of knowledge building in Ayurveda is extremely rational, very empirical. So I have just tried to map that system which is reflecting this, and then there is a research method described. I mean, how to verify. This is called as pariksha. Aptobadeshat jnanam, jnanavadam dvividha pariksha, which means you had to verify the knowledge you obtained from your teacher. In our tradition, research was first and then only teaching. Today research comes second. After you study the subject in PhD, you are doing research. But in Ayurveda, Kanadam Paniniyam cha Sarvashastropagaragam. First of all, you have to study Tarka Sangraha, which is a research method. Then you study Aptobadesha, and then you do a Tarka on that. One of the methods of learning Shastra is Akshepa. You have to do Akshepa of the Shastra, means attack it, try to falsify it, and then get the Samadhana. So this method of learning is completely lost, and so Ayurveda was very rational in this method, and this is very clearly evident in Charaka Samhita and his famous statement, Vina tarkena ya siddhi yadricha siddhirevasa. Means if you treat a patient and you cure him, and if you cannot justify why, it's yadricha siddhi. It's accidental success. So success is not enough. Vina bikriya swasthyam gachadam shoda. Ayurveda texts say that even if you don't treat, patients will get better. In fact, sometimes treating is a problem. Patients get worse because of the treatment. It's called mithyopacharajanya vyadhi. The treatment is creating the problem. And Chakramani clearly says that Gunakshara Nyaya, that is a worm will take the shape of a letter. It doesn't know that it is a letter. There are Vaidyas like this, Natra Vaidyaha Roga Pramokshe Karanam. But they do something accidentally and the patient gets better and they take the claim. So this is to be avoided. And this was called by Chakrapani, in terms of the coining of a terminology, this is historically very, very important. He uses the term Pratiniyamiki Siddhi. Pratiniyamiki Siddhi for a real effect. Today in statistics, the whole concept of medical statistics is how to distinguish between a chance effect and a real effect. Placebo is also described. Manasaha arthanukulyadhi tushtirurja balodaya sukhoba bhogadacha syad vyadhes chato. Yes? Yeah. No, what Ayurveda says is that placebo should be a medicine. What is the problem with placebo? This problem is created by modern medical profession, because they want to poison the patients with unnecessary medication, because there is also what you call as a nocebo effect. There are studies which have shown that if a patient has absolutely no faith in your treatment, it will not work. So the first initiation of healing is from the mind of the individual. The mind is that which heals. So in Ayurveda we initiate, that is why we say you must have faith in the physician, you must have faith first of all in yourself that you will get better. And then if you dismiss, we have no problem in telling that Ayurveda is proud to say that we use the placebo effect, which is the first, which is Dhanvantari, which is the healing power that you have in your own system. In fact, I was listening to a conference on integrative medicine. There's a famous psychiatrist who said the case for the placebo. He said that the placebo is the best medicine, because there's no other medicine in the world which has been tested so many times and has majority of the times turned out to be better than the tested medicine. So there was this famous study on mammary artery ligation. In heart angina, they used to do mammary artery ligation. They cut open the chest, ligate the mammary artery, patients get better. One day a surgeon decided that I will test this out. He had two groups. Now it's not possible to do this kind of study. Ethics will not allow this. But at that time he did it. He had two groups. One group he would just cut and close. The other he would ligate. And he found that the group which received the sham surgery responded better. They had fewer recurrences of angina. Now it's well known the color of the placebo matters. If you give a blue pill, the effect is different. If you give a red pill, the effect is different. So if you want to calm a patient, make him sleep, you give a blue pill. If you want to give a placebo for pain, you give a red pill. Even the strength of the placebo, if you write 100 mg and if you give another person 500 mg, 500 mg will work better. The cost also. The cost works. If it's more expensive, it works better. So we can also say that most of allopathic treatments are working because of the cost. So even this bypass surgeries and all that, we don't know whether it's still having a placebo effect. So this is being discussed in medical circles now. It's also whether you get the placebo from a hospital or from a shop or whether you buy it yourself creates a difference. So you cannot avoid the mind. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo. This is a foundation in Ayurveda. So manasaha arthanukulyad. If you can bring the mind of the patient into a favorable poise, tushtirurja balodaya, it affects your immune system. Today we are talking about PNEI axis, psycho, neuro, endocrino immunology. This is the axis Ayurveda was talking about. Manas, Vata, Pitta and Kapha. Manas is psycho, Vata is the neurological mechanism, Pitta is the endocrine system and Kapha is the immunological system. There is a crosstalk across these components. So Ayurveda was the first psychosomatic system because it says taptyajya ghadayoriva. Manas and body is like taptajya ghada. That if you put hot ghee into a cold iron vessel, the vessel will get heated. If you put cold ghee into a hot iron vessel, again ghee will also get heated. This is the relationship between the body and the mind. So the placebo is, even today, is the best medicine. I think the Vedic medicine was more placebo, suggestion. So it's not primitive. We talk up that, that's why I didn't want to use the word magico-religious. It's not magico-religious, it's very commonsensical, very gentle and very straight. You just suggest to the patient, you're going to get better. And you may use a ritual so that the suggestion is very powerful. And through that suggestion, the patient heals. This is becoming the future medicine. So in the Kaushika Sutra, for example, that suggestive medicine was considered superior. And they are a little regretting that we have to use logical medicine now. That we have to come down to the level of rational system of medicine. So this is the way Ayurveda has approached, and placebo has definitely been described because, you know, in Ayurvedic text, this questioning, the rationality, the Ashtanga Hridaya Samhita, when it ends, the Agnivesha is asking his teacher. That's why the first textbook is Agnivesha Samhita. The student is glorified. Ityatrayad agamaya artha suktam tat suktinam peshalanam atruptah Bhedadinam sammado bhakti namrah paprachedanim samshayano Agnivesha. Agnivesha is getting a doubt after studying everything. He says, Drishyande Bhagavan Kejid Atmavandobi Rogina. This is the perennial question. Sir, I can see a lot of people who are leading healthy life. They are the most sick people in this world. And I can see the Davyobastadra Sampanna, Vruddha Vaidya Madanuga, they are following all the advice, but still they are sick. And there are others who are Yateshta Cheshtas, and they are healthy and happy. So how can I believe that your system has any use? For me, this is just chance effect. And then comes Atreya, and Atreya doesn't, attack Agnivesha. He is appreciating that question, and he is giving the answer. He says, Chikitsa cha na tulya bhavetu marhati. Because there are three types of diseases. Diseases which are self-limiting, diseases which are incurable, and then diseases which will work only with medicine. And he says, don't interfere in diseases where it will heal by itself. This is the first thing medical doctors should learn even today. Because today we have reached a stage where a consultation should end in a prescription. It's not necessary. I think it was in the Lancet that there was this 85% of the consultations, not diseases, consultations, are for conditions which would have got cured in spite of the consultation. There's about 15% are for diseases which would never be cured anyway. And it's only 5% of the consultations that are actually where a medical intervention is needed. So I am talking about consultations, not incidence of diseases, because we consult, over consult physicians when we have this concern, and most of the time the physician has only to assure, but they are unnecessarily prescribing medicines. There was a paper in Lancet very recent. Completed. So then we have the pharmacopoeia of Ayurveda, the diagnostic tools, because we had methods of testing urine, of blood, of the different, Ayurvedic method of testing stools is remarkably coinciding with what is today called as the Bristol stool chart. The 7 classifications correspond exactly to, so body substances and fluids, they had a very systematic way of testing them. And pulse diagnosis, I would like to say, Ayurveda based this idea. Now we understand they were not looking at the heart, but rather at heartbeats, but heart rate variability. Heart rate variable because each beat of the heart is different from the next, and there is a variation. The total physiological condition, especially the autonomic regulation, reflects onto your heartbeat. So I understood this when I was studying about HRV, and the traditional physician would just feel the pulse till he can sense a pattern in the mind, and you would say it's like a frog, or it's like an elephant, or it's like a snake, which means that this is the same way that an HRV gives you a pattern. So they were creating a graph in their mind. Today you are using HRV to predict prognosis. It's still a new science, but they begun to understand that studying HRV is more important than just looking at the pulse rate. And so this again, you can see that Ayurveda was very early there. In pharmacy, in Ayurvedic method of pharmacy, and I want to just point out, we discovered a method called solid state fermentation. Solid state fermentation is interesting because today, according to the GMP standards, we should make our factories bacteria free, and it looks like this is not good, because bacteria are necessary for some of our medicines to be properly manufactured. There is a fermentation that happens. For one of our medicines, Vilvadi Gudika, when we grind it for 30 days, a small fungus is formed, which is actually creating an antibiotic efficacy of that herb. If you make this in sterile environment, it will not go. Recently, a scientist in Kerala studied this, that when we make tablets or when we make aristas, we make it in such a way that there is no intoxication in the mind, but the beneficial effects of alcohol are utilized for the medicine to work much faster. And what he found is that many of these molecules, active molecules in these herbs, are transformed before ingestion, so that they become more bioavailable and they become more active. Otherwise, by the time the body biotransforms it, it would be ready for excretion, and so the time period where it is active biologically is very less. So the Ayurvedic method of making dosage forms is extremely rich and diverse. Even if you look at other traditions, they have mostly powders. That is what is happening to Ayurveda. When it goes into the West, only powders. And in fact, Ayurveda says powders are the most dangerous way of using a herb, because you use the whole of the herb. Nothing is lost. So all harmful things are also there. When we extract and refine it, we create a balance between what is good and bad in that herb, and so it is much more balanced when we. So in Ayurveda, in Europe, Tulasi has been banned. Tulasi is banned. Bala is a very famous medicine, is banned. Vacha, which we give to children, is banned. Licorice is also, some chemicals are removed and only then it is used. This is because they don't know anything about this rich dosage form preparation. So we say that nahi kinchit adosha dirguna, all herbs are having side effects. This is the first thing Ayurveda says. So how you combine them, how you process them makes them safe, and how you use them makes them safe. So then we have, Ayurveda went through all these challenges. Now the birth myths, I'll quickly go through this. I think it doesn't require description. You know that, the extrauterine fertilization, extrauterine gestation, cloning of fetuses, surrogate mothers, external influence in intrauterine life, asexual reproduction. These are all kind of things described in the classical Ayurvedic texts, which at least points out they were thinking scientifically. I mean, I always ask this question, was Ayurveda techno-savvy, or are we against this kind of conflict we see in many of the Semitic religions and traditions? Somehow in Ayurveda these inhibitions are not there. You can imagine that this could have been blasphemy to even think about extrauterine. So in Ayurveda very happily they write about all this. We don't know whether it actually happened, but the very fact that they could conceive of such ideas shows the kind of scientific freedom that was available in those times. Almost every possibility they have kind of explored. Then we have preservation of dead bodies. In the Ramayana, I mean, mummification is of course we equate it to Egypt, but in our tradition also we had methods to mummify bodies and keep them for a long time. In Ramayana it is mentioned. Oils were used to mummify bodies. And then we have artificial limbs, head transplant, which is being attempted in Italy, I know. But Ayurveda talks about the possibility of it. So it looks like Ayurveda says head transplant. So then everything else is possible. So it doesn't discuss about if you can transplant the head of an individual, then why worry about other organs? But head transplant is mentioned. It's not. There's no technology for this, so I don't believe that it was actually done. But they did think about even the possibility of transplanting a head. There is eye transplant. Artificial denture is described. Okay, so a few slides I will. Okay, this is the transmission of Ayurveda from India. Now I want to tell in the next few minutes how Ayurveda had a very interesting concept about genetic transmission of diseases. I think this in the history of medical science is very significant, that at a very early period in Ayurvedic history we had a model of how genetic transmission happened of diseases from one generation to the other. So we have in Ayurveda diseases Adi Bala Pravarta, Janma Bala Pravarta. So we have three ideas here: diseases that are present at the time of birth, diseases inherited from family, and diseases that are caused by factors before conception, which means it could come from the mother and the father. So these are the different types of diseases where genetic and congenital are distinguished, Adi Bala and Janma Bala, because disease could be created while the child is in the womb. So apparently good inheritance is damaged when in intrauterine life if you are affected. So this is distinguished. And the genetic mechanism, this is interesting that we use the word bija dosha. It's called as bija dosha. Now what is a bija? The bija, there are two types of bijas, the pum bija, which is the male seed, and the stri bija, which is the female seed. And if there is a bija dosha, then it manifests as a sahaja vyadhi. So it means that there should be a defect in the pum bija or the stri bija for a disease to become sahaja. So which means it happens even before the child is actually born. It is already there in the one of the two parents. And what's more interesting here is that they talk about bija has many bija bhagas, and bija bhagas has bija bhaga avayavas. And we have a very interesting term called janaka. It's very similar to the modern term gene. So janaka is the progenitor of a particular part, organ, or part of an organ. That entity is called as a janaka. So here the thing is, the question here is that in the human bija there is the whole bija, which is the total map, and then we have the part of that which is bija bhaga, and then the bija bhaga avaya, which is a sub part. Now where the damage has happened, accordingly the corresponding part of the body will be affected. Could be, if the whole bija is affected, the fetus will not be viable. If it is a part, then a particular organ or that area for which it is mapping. So this idea that the bija maps the entire body and in an organized hierarchical way is perhaps the first genetic model of transmission of diseases. I did search for in the Greek tradition. There are ideas of genetic disease, but there is not a model which describes how actually this happens. So such bija bhagas or bija bhaga avayavas are called as janakas of specific structures of the body, and so they can lead to, so the janaka or progenitor or genetic, which is very similar to the gene, if they are good, then we have well formed or partial or a complete damage to organs. Right. So now it's tempting to think about this. I mean, this is just a speculation. I have no claims because we don't know. There was no, the molecular basis have definitely not been described. But if you look at the model and compare, then the Ayurvedic model does have some comparison, because the whole chromosome set, Pum Bija, which is the chromosome set inherited from the male, and the Stri Bija, which is the, so that makes up the whole chromosomes, and then we have the Bija Bhaga, which is the DNA, and then specific portions of the DNA which code as specific genes. So this is the model that we get, and I think historically this is very important. I mean, they are quite accurate when it comes to, yes. So I'm skipping these things. Now cancer is another area. So to put a, what is interesting is Ayurveda talked about Arbuda. The word Arbuda means Arvu Himsayam, that which kills. Arbudo Shata Kotishu. Arbuda is Shata and Koti. So it, the word Arbuda itself says that something which kills by multiplying into hundreds and crores. That is the meaning of that word Arbuda itself. And we distinguish between Arbuda and Granthi. Granthi is, you know, a benign tumor, a knotted thing. Sakosham, there is a capsule, encapsulation. Arbuda is without a kosha. So in Charaka Samhita is interesting, when the Arbuda is excised, he says Sakosham Udhritya. Make sure that you remove it along with the kosha, and not to leave Sashesham. Sashesham Agnivat Haret. If you leave any residual tumor there, it will kill like fire. So this is very clearly mentioned. Now what is interesting is they talk about Shobha or inflammation as a cause. Trishothiyam, there's a chapter on Shotha, and Arbuda is an outcome of long standing Shotha or inflammation, which is, you know, also the kind of idea that modern science is developing today. Now just some couple of points here which is interesting is that they discussed about metastasis. Recurrence is called as Adhyarbudam. Adhyarbudam means recurrence of Arbuda in the same place where it was removed or treated, and Dirarbudam means coming in another place. So this idea of metastasis, even the clinical description of Arbuda, this is also not recognized, because historically nobody has. I have contributed one paper in Indian Journal for History of Science highlighting the Ayurvedic understanding of cancer from a historical point of view. Because these descriptions are very, very accurate. Many cancers have actually been clinically described in Ayurveda, and they have been understood. One of the things is Mahavastu Parigraham, means they will capture lot of regions. Achalyam means they are fixed. Kritamulam means, you know, rooting, and so all these things were clinically kind of recognized. Now 7 layers of skin is another thing. The last thing I want to talk about is pathogenic organisms, and with this we will conclude. It's 1:20. So it's quite fascinating that Ayurveda described pathological organisms into Sahaja and Agantuja. Sahaja is the normal harmless pathogens, and Ayurveda always believed that preserving them is very important for your health. They are not pathogens. So but I'm talking about pathogenic, but I wanted to tell at the beginning that we already talked about Sahaja Krimis, and today gut microbiome is considered so important. There are some studies which have been initiated to show how Ayurvedic medicines regulate the gut microbiome and thereby initiate healing. So this is a classification of the various krimis mentioned in Ayurvedic texts. They are Shonitajam, Shleshmajam, you know, Bahya krimis, Abhyandara krimis. They have put all pathogenic organisms together, and microbes is one category under them. And this is what is fascinating, because to think that they had a very clear idea of microscopic organisms, minute, anu, circular, vritta, and without any feet. I'm sorry, that part is missing. Apadaha. Vritta sukshmaha. Apadascha. Kejit saukshmyad adarshanaha. Saukshmyad adarshanaha means you cannot see them. Now this is a very clear distinction. Mamsa chakshusha na drishyam. This is specifically mentioned by Arunadatta. So this again takes the understanding of the presence of microorganisms historically, predates it much before this was well recognized in modern medicine. So historically some of the foundational breakthroughs in understanding, we can see in Ayurveda. Oh yeah, the apadas have come here because of the extremely minute size, kejit saukshmya adarshana. So Arunadatta clearly says that they are invisible to the human eye, mamsa chakshus, and they are microscopic, and he says you can only infer their existence. So whenever these things come, asmadadinam buddhirna prabhavati, adindriyartha vishaye asmadadinam buddhirna prabhavati. This is what the commentators say. For people like us, this is atindriya, we cannot say what it is. But then were there some other people who could do this, because somebody has first discovered this? That is still not known. So this is quite enigmatic, how Ayurveda discovered this. So these are just some snapshots of the Ayurvedic contributions to world medicine. So some of the areas, there are many much more such findings, and I think so far Ayurvedic history has been written purely from a Western perspective. It's true of even Indian history. The same thing reflects in Ayurveda also. We are still, a lot of Indian scholars have tried to develop it, but today we know, because of advancements of medical science, we are in a better position to also understand the significance of many of the Ayurvedic discoveries. I think that is very much called for. So I think I will stop here.
Sir, I am Kuldeep Dhiman. I met interacted with some Vaidyas, and they say that actually it's the medicine that doesn't cure. It's not that. It's a mystery. They say a good Ayurvedic doctor should also be a Jyotisha, because without Jyotisha then the doctor is incomplete, they say. Because they say this, you have to give medicine according to the Grihadasha and also the Ritu and such things. And of course the mind of the personality of the patient. Do you have to say anything on this, sir?
Yeah, first thing is that I don't use Jyotish in my practice, and we have found excellent results. So I cannot endorse the view that we definitely need Jyotish. We did a clinical trial with funding from the National Institutes of Health, USA. It's the first clinical trial done with funding from outside India, and we found that Ayurvedic intervention was equivalent with fewer side effects to methotrexate. And this study won a big award from the European Society of Integrative Medicine. So it's very clear that Ayurveda works even without all these things. But Jyotish was at one point of time, the Ayurveda Vaidya was also supposed to be a Daivatnya. Now Jyotisha it's very difficult to bring it into the domain of science because of its subjectivity, because of the epistemology on the basis of which it is based. In my understanding, the Jyotisha is a very deep communication with nature, with the universe. When a patient comes and you show the Jyotish chart, you are putting the universe in front of the person. You are bringing down your problem to a universal perspective. So there is a lot of psychological and other elements also in Jyotisha, because the grahas are nothing but the sun is your self, the moon is your mind, the Buddha is your intellect, the Shukra is your artistic mind, the two lobes of your brain, Kuja is the masculine expressive part of your brain, and Guru is the experience you gain from your actions, and Shani is the disciplining influence of your own experiences. So you are actually mapping your karma when you are doing Jyotisha. So this is definitely we are doing, whether with the help of classical Jyotish or otherwise. Adurasya antaratmanam. Jnana buddhi pradipena yona visadi yogavit adurasya antaratmanam nasa rogams chikitsati. This is what Charaka says. If you cannot enter into the antaratma of your patient, you cannot treat him. And if you say the purpose of Jyotish was to get into the antaratma of the person, see the Chandra Surya, means see the mind, see the self, see the aspirations, see the whole outcome of that person's psychology. This is definitely needed. If you can use Jyotish for that, well and good. But I don't know, I am not an expert in Jyotish. I found it very difficult to study and practice it the way it was done in ancient times. And I have not found also astrologers who could fully convince me. I think astrology has also become very commercial. Sorry to say that. And people are not, you need to be a real tapasvi to become a good astrologer. So, but the message is very clear, that get into the depth of that individual's personality. To that extent, you have to be a Daivatnya, who knows the past, who can see, have that X-ray vision into the deeper personality of the patient. That I think is very essential.
Maybe just one more question.
Yes.
Could I speak? My name is Kannan. As to the locus of the self, the Atman, in the Mahabharata there is a statement, Shito Murdhanam Atmatu Shariram Paripalayan. So the locus of the self is the Shiras. And as regards the statement of Charaka or Sushrita that you made, where the various pranas and the indriyas are in the Shiras, Shrito prana sarve indriyanicha, that statement. Actually the origin of that is in Aitareya Aranyaka itself, wherein the very derivation of the word Shiras is from root Shri. So where also it is traced that all the pranas and the indriyas are located in the Shiras, and therefore that is the real center of the being.
Yes, because in Ayurveda we clearly say that the Atman is Vibhu, so it's wrong to locate it anywhere. That's out of the question. But it's the Manas. When we talk about the Manas, the Shiras, we have this idea of the Sahasrara, of the Shiva Shakti Samagama, because the head we call as Shankha. Shankha means there are two things which are compared to the Shankha in the Ayurvedic tradition, also with some influence from the Tantric philosophy. Shankha is Shamkha, that is auspicious space. One is the womb in the woman, Shankha cha nabhyagradir yoni trayavarta cha sasmada, and the other is the head. So even in the pujas we use Shankha, it is actually the Amrita that is emerging in. So these are two places where Shiva and Shakti can unite, where the Jiva and the Paramatma can unite. So in Ayurveda also, that the mind which is united with that awareness has come in, that actually has to happen here. So when you bring that self-awareness into your conscious life, which is not normally there, that is why we say that actually the awareness of self is unconscious, it is in your heart. Deep inside when you love, or when but to bring it to your conscious awareness, that is what we call as the opening of the Sahasrara, Padma. In Ayurveda there is a herb which we call as Shankha Pushpi. And many people said it is Shankha Pushpi because the flower is like a Shankha. I did a lot of work on this. I hunted for the Shankha Pushpi. Finally, I came to the conclusion, looking at the description of the plant, Sushruta describes this plant. There is no Shankha or Pushpa for this. Golomi chajalomi cha romashe kanda sambhave. Hamsapadeva vichinnai patrer kanda samudbhavai athava Shankha Pushpyava samana sarvarupada. So this is like it's like a fern. There is no flower in it. So Shankhe Pushpadedi Shankha, because Medhya Visheshena tu Shankha Pushpi. Shankha Pushpi is used in a condition called Atattva Abhinivesha. Atattva Abhinivesha means losing reality, not understanding what is reality. So Shankha Pushpi in Ayurveda, it means the flowering of your mind in the Shiras, which means bringing that consciousness of self, bringing the awareness of the self into your conscious state. So in that way there is no contradiction in Ayurveda. Self can be everywhere. Self can be everywhere in the body.
Okay, last question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So You gave the example of the sparrow knowing how to heal or do something, use something that is human beings. We lost it, is it? Or human, because there is, I've read somewhere that there is in these tropical forests, there was this boy who would just walk into a forest and he would say, the plants are telling me what they can do and how they can help me. And he would pick out those herbs and bring it back, okay? So if Ayurveda is that old and it's lost into time and everything, so even before that, probably human beings had some quality. I just want to know, have you all explored that, and are they human beings like
Yes,
that?
I've also tried to, because this is there, this idea is there in the shamanic traditions in South America. So they use a potion called ayahuasca. It's a combination of two herbs, and I also took it a little bit with the hope, trying to see whether I can communicate with the plants. Planning to go there again, because at that time I had to travel the next day. So I watched some other people taking it, and just for namesake I took a little bit. It is supposed to, there is a book by DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. It's by Jeremy Narby, he's an anthropologist, who did this, and he said that when you take this medicine, your mind, you are going into an altered state of perception, and you are seeing a lot of snakes. And so what he says is, you are getting a molecular insight, insight into the molecular basis of the plants. The shamans communicate to the plants in this state. This in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it is said that this kind of focusing on a samyama, on an object, gives you the knowledge of that object. Aushadha is one of the ways which you can use it. It's not encouraged much in our tradition. Through the practice of yoga, when you become in a meditative state, Ayurveda believes that we can grasp, because all the tribals and all forest dwellers, they learn in this way, not because of chemistry. Last example, this ayahuasca, there are two combinations and they have a diet. It was found that the substance which is causing this activation of the brain, it will actually be digested by our stomach. So they add an inhibitor. The second plant is an inhibitor. So how did they know this chemistry? They had no idea. In India we use turmeric. Now it is only a coloring agent for our food, because we are not using pepper anymore. Turmeric, curcumin in turmeric cannot be absorbed by our body. It's very poorly bioavailable. Piperine enhances the bioavailability 2000 times. So the MD Anderson Cancer Center in India, cancer incidence is low. The number of cancer cases are more because of our population. In the US, 10 times more is the cancer incidence, and one of the reasons they think that in India cancer incidence was low is because of the use of turmeric. But now we have replaced pepper with chilies. So now the turmeric we take will be just excreted, it will not be utilized. So if we can change, we can bring back pepper. Now how did they know this chemistry? So this is not through laboratory experiments. So there is another way to communicate with nature, and we seem to have really lost it. Thank you.